Okay, thank you, Dr. Hammer. With that, I want to turn it over to Nathan Burley, and I want to say, first of all, thank you for joining a bunch of Pennsylvania people to tell your story about HPAI and dairy. I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to go ahead and just share some of what you experienced and learned. I actually can't hear you. You're on mute. It's like, all right,
How
looks like
about now?
you're off now. Go ahead. Wait, every time you go to show your camera, you go on mute. Maybe just turn off your camera and yeah, now on mute. Go ahead.
How about now?
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. Yeah, I got another phone call too while that was happening, so that also doesn't help. But no, we milk 500 cows here in Michigan, and we're a closed herd. We raise all of our own heifers on site. Um, we're AI bred, so we're not bringing in bulls. Haven't for many years, and I thought we would be able to not get it at our facility. And um, yeah, we also run a technology in our cows um, that monitors body temperature, activity, and rumination. It's a SMAC Tech monitoring system. It's a bolus that goes in their stomach. So I did figure that if we got it, I would know right away, and we would be able to treat the cows that got sick quickly, efficiently, and get them through it. And I was quite surprised. I've never saw any other disease this widespread affect the cattle like it did. Um, us in the dairy industry, it kind of resembles a toxic mastitis case of how fast it hits them and how sick they feel and get. Um, they feel like crap. Their temperature goes extremely high. Um, we looked at our data after the fact of all of our infected cows, and the average temp rise from their normal body temp was 5.1 degree above normal. So those are very hot, sick cows. And then you have your outliers that are even higher than that, where rumen function is even more negatively affected and long term negatively affected. Probably had about 5% of the herd that we had to cull because they didn't respond. We just couldn't get them through it, and rumens wouldn't bounce back. Um, economically, um, a big hit with both extra labor, with um, extra medicine to try to keep these girls, feeling okay. Our protocol was aspirin twice a day to everybody that had the elevated temp. um, a rumen therapy bolus to try to keep rumen population up. Um, it also had some hydration stuff with it in that bolus. Shot of vitamin B, and we were doing that to every cow with a temp for at least 3 days, unless they continued longer with a temp, and we just kept trying to do something. Usually, after that first 3 days, the cows get so dehydrated that we have to start pumping them with water just to try to keep them hydrated because they feel sick enough they don't get up, they don't want to drink, and then they really get dehydrated. Um, so that's how we took care of it. That's what we saw. I'm going to say about half of our herd, rough numbers, had the elevated temperature and um, were affected with it. Trying to think of other things to speak about. Does anybody have any
Yeah,
questions?
I do have a couple questions, Nathan. First of all, what did you see? So you talked about the short term impact you saw with about 50% of your herd showing elevated temperatures and about 5% that didn't recover. What were some of the long term effects? When you and I talked earlier this month, you had said about um, late gestation abortions and that kind of thing. What have you seen since the outbreak? How are you continuing to deal with some of the rippling effects of it?
Yeah. I guess I didn't really talk about milk production. We're a fairly high output herd. We're in that 95 to 100 pounds of milk throughout the year. We milk Holsteins, get 4.41 butter fat. So, our solids are strong. And during the high infection 3-4 weeks that we had, that time frame, um, our milk production went down to 75 pounds, and it was a slow drop in 3 weeks to 75, and then it was a little slower recovery than what it dropped. So there was 6 weeks where we were down significantly in milk production. For the first month, I'd say we were down 11 pounds overall. And then for the second month, we were still down 6. And honestly, we haven't recovered since. It hasn't been that bad of a summer here. We've had very stable forages as we would throughout the summer. We feed triticale in the summertime and have for 4 years now. Usually that keeps us right there with the summer heats that we get. And I cannot get back to our baseline again. We were at 99 pounds at the end of April when it hit us, and we cannot get back there. I've tried to tweak the diet enough, and I think we just lost some of our potential in all of our cows that got sick, and they were in that mid lactation range, and they're just not able to recover back to where they were. So reproduction also has had its challenges through that time. Right off the bat with those high temps, we were aborting calves. I had a half a dozen that were 150-day pregnant or more that spit out calves, and then quite a few other ones that were shorter term. And for about 6 weeks, in a stretch there, our preg checks were not near as good as they were before. And we've done well with improving our reproduction program using that SMEC technology in the bullets, but we were not able to see the heats as good. They didn't show very good heats for like a month afterwards, and then they weren't conceiving as well either. So there's definitely some ripple effect that I think is still showing up. I hate to blame it on that one thing, so I'm trying to figure out what else it is of why we're not making the milk we should be right now. But it kind of just points back to those cows not recovering in their milk curve like they were.
And I mean, anyone who has dealt with sick cow, especially in a primary lactation, knows they never recover. It takes a whole lactation for some. I'm sure it'll take a whole lactation for some of those cows to recover. Um, so one question we did have is about the activity system and whether or not it picked it up ahead of time. You had said beginning of your comments that you were hoping the activity system would allow you to get ahead of it. And you speak to how that did or did not help.
It did help. Like I really like to have that temperature data. I actually called the company up. They're a very good customer relation company. Like they really help us when we need it. So I called them up and I said, "Hey, I have a problem. I usually have about 20 to 25 health alerts that are happening on a daily basis, and I jumped over 50 overnight. And I'm like, what is happening? There's a lot of high temp alerts. This isn't normal." Um, and of course, I had heard that the flu was in our area, as far as Michigan. And so I was alert and aware to watch for it. And when I saw that temp alert pop up to a plus 25 overnight, I'm like, well, I think we have it. And we started to try to put our protocols into place. probably what I would do different in the whole scheme of treatment is I would probably push more water to the cows that I thought were sick. Um, and maybe some electrolytes in the water, things like that. That
Mm.
would be something I would do different. I'd be set up better to just not manually pump cows with a hand pump, probably do something more um, electric or gas motor type pump deal and have that pre-set up to fill cows up with water because I could see their water intakes would go from 40 gallons a day on a high producing cow to like 5.
Mhm.
And that's what she needed at that point was water. So I wanted to bring that out and not forget to talk about that um, as I was preparing for uh,
There's
sharing.
Yeah, there's a couple more questions that came on. Next question, I think what they're asking is if any cows have completed their lactation and are on to their second lactation after infection. I think it's asking to the long-term effects you're seeing if once that lactation is completed, if you saw anything in the next lactation after.
I guess right now I haven't analyzed or noticed that as much. It would be something that I should look at. One thing that I did notice as it hit our herd, the first group that got infected, it kind of stayed in that group for about 3 or 4 days and it didn't go to another group because we have 4 different barns with, I think, 9 different groups of lactating cows. And they have a separation between the barns. And in one of our barns, there's 2 groups in the barn. The group on the west end of the barn got it, and that was a lactating cow group. The group right next to them on the east end is our close-up dry cows, and they share a drinker in the middle of the 2 pens or the pens. And I thought for sure that our close-up dry cows were doomed, and they never got sick.
Wow.
And that was really interesting to me. And that at that point, as I was going through it and I was about done, I really started reaching out to people in the industry that could analyze the data that I was getting because I thought I had something that we could learn with the temperature data that stays recorded, as well as just how this progressed around my facility. So I invited people to kind of come and test with Michigan State University, the CDC, USDA. I wanted to learn about it to help the industry, just because of how sick these cows get
Mhm.
and and like how easy it was for us to get it. I was very, very surprised that we got it because we're not moving cows around. We're not moving cows in here. I truck my own cattle. I just don't, I didn't understand exactly how I got it. The only thing that makes a little bit of sense to me is we have a large chicken egg laying farm around us, and they had to depopulate somewhere in that 15 to 20 million birds because they had the bird flu severely. And they're about a mile to a mile and a half away from us. And when they were depopulating, they were putting their chickens in windrows according to how they were supposed to dispose of them outside and composting them. And we could smell that process. So whether or not it's able to move that way, I don't know. But that, I mean, there's a lot of dairy and poultry intermingled in Pennsylvania. So I think it's a slippery slope, if that's a way that it can move around.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, so that poultry facility went down after another dairy near it was infected, right? So did it
Um,
from a
I mean,
dairy to the poultry to your back to your dairy, or do you know?
say that question again.
Did it move from one dairy to through the poultry barn to another dairy, or do you have any
Oh,
idea?
I wouldn't know the progression of how it moved around
Hmm.
for certain. All I know is in the same time period in April, they had to depopulate, and there was multiple farms in my neighborhood that had the flu.
Hmm.
So it was just quite a coincidence how it all happened at the same time. And then it's kind of moved out of this area. And it's that's why I wanted to share my data so that somebody else could figure that out so that we could learn from it.
So there's a couple more questions that came in. Number one, can you just give a time frame of when you started seeing the temperature alerts on the activity system and when the vet or testing confirmed that you had HPAI? Do you see the temperatures increasing before the confirmed cases, or what did that look like?
So when it's happening, you don't have any time to worry about reporting. You're trying to take care of cows. Like my whole crew probably only slept 4 hours a night because you're taking care of that many sick cows. We milk 500 and we were treating 250 to 300 cows at the peak of the problem a day, twice a day with aspirin, pumping, and trying to do all the other work on a dairy. There is no time to think about testing. I mean, you have it. You have sick cows, and that's our job is to take care of them. So the best advice I have, and I like to answer that question, I don't know.
Hmm.
We tested about 2 weeks after the first high temperature entered my herd. So we basically, I got protocols down. We were starting to get less cases every day by that point. It was early on. I mean, we're looking at the 1st of May. I didn't know a lot of what was going on. I had heard the milk was extremely contagious. I
Hmm.
was worried about actually reporting because I was worried I couldn't sell my milk.
Hmm.
And if I don't have income, I'm screwed. Like I'm done. So I just held back for a while and I didn't report. And I just took care of cows. I tried to call people that wouldn't, would give me some honest advice. And finally, after a couple weeks, I said, um, after a couple weeks, um, I reported it because I wanted to help. And also the financial burden that I could see that it was going to be. I was really hopeful that the government would help us out because on our 500 cow farm, I'm guessing right at first, the initial effect, not the long lasting effect, was about $100,000.
Hmm.
So I was hoping that there would be some emergency relief money that would come along, and there is. So that and with that emergency relief money, the best thing that you can do when you get the disease, the problem come in, is record how many cows get sick, record everything that you can. I know it's like the last thing that we want to do when we're trying to take care of all these sick animals, but try to have some sort of record. I was fortunate because I had the temperature record. That was simple for me to record who had it and who didn't. But that's the thing that we need to keep track of is how many animals are getting sick, and then we know if we, how big this problem is, nationwide.
Yeah, and you mentioned you did not report it right away because you were worried about your market. Did you see any issues with your market, or were they working right alongside of you? Like, what was that experience like?
The only issue that I had after I reported was I was suggested or advised to not sell my cull cow animals at a sale barn, to
Hmm.
sell them direct to a slaughter market, slaughterhouse. butchering facility like that. And in the past, I've saw some negative when I do that, some problem, is I will get more condemned cows that way. I'll get cows that we don't get paid for. And it was quite interesting because I saw the same thing. I didn't sell any cow that I thought would have a problem. When I did sell direct, I held as many cows as I could during that time. And but we are a herd that grows within. Um, I sell about 15 to 20 extra 2-year-olds a month right now because we just have too many 2-year-olds and we're keeping our cows healthy, and that's a great thing. But at the time, the animals that had to leave, I was replacing with those 2-year-olds. So the
Mhm.
ones that had to leave were these call animals, and I sent them to direct to the slaughterhouse. And I got out of the one load that I had five, I had two condemned. One was for cancer, and another one was for something else. But it wasn't. I guess it wasn't pneumonia, is how that was labeled. And I know that she didn't have a temperature when she was sent, but maybe there was something there, bird flu wise, of why they condemned her because of her lungs. So that's the only thing I saw was my meat sales. That was a little bit of a problem, but so we also did testing after the fact to try to get to a negative status, and it took a long time for bird flu in the milk to be non-detectable. Um, I can't remember exactly the number of weeks, but something like 2.5 months from when our first high temperature was till it was not detected in the milk anymore.
So, related to milk production, there's a question. How much of the lost milk production were you able to recover? You mentioned that you weren't back up to 99 pounds yet. Did you recover 80%, 90%,
Uh, we're at
95?
uh, we're at 93, and we just cannot get any closer to that 99.
Mm.
And a normal summer, we would be 95, 96. So 3, 4 pounds maybe.
And then, so there's two questions. One is how many cows were exposed, and I feel like you had touched on that. It infected about half your herd. And it sounds, have you applied? Or you talked about the assistance. Have you applied for that assistance yet, or did you get any
Yes, I
outcome? And what was that process like?
the process was not too bad. The form that the USDA has is, or the FSA, whichever agency is doing that, um, it's a little confusing about what they're asking. But what they're asking for is how many sick cows were did you have in your herd? How many cows were sick that you withheld from production? And that's how they're wording it. Um, that's why I say keeping track of the number of cows that are sick are the important thing when a herd is infected.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Just keeping that data written down. The last question I have for you, we might have more later, but last question for right now is, are you continuing to monitor the herd with bulk tank sampling or in any other way?
Yes, we are doing weekly bulk tank sampling. Since I was deemed negative, we've continued to do weekly bulk tank sampling as well as a monthly all cow sampling. So basically, any cow that is withheld from the tank, whether she was too fresh to be in the tank or treated with antibiotics or withheld for any other reason, we sample all of those cows. We do it on a Tuesday when our vet's here every week because it has to be an authorized sampler to take that sample. So we have them go through and take the samples out of our withheld cows, and our milk hauler is authorized to pull the sample out of the bulk tank. and it's a pretty simple, easy process. Even one.
Okay. So, Nathan, that's all the questions I have right now. Thank you so much. And then we may have some more at the end, so just stay on, but we really appreciate taking the time to talk through this and share just
You're
a little
welcome.
bit of what you went
You're
through.
welcome.
Next on our program, we have Michelle Couch from Couch's Turkey Farm, who's going to talk a little bit about how she saw HPA impact poultry facilities that she worked with and what she sees as the need for preparedness. So, Shelley, I know I saw you join.
Yes, I'm here.
So you want to go ahead and get started? I'm still looking for you. As soon as I find you, I'll pin you to the screen.
Okay, that's fine. So we had 3 farms of our 23 contract growers go positive in 2023 with HPAI. And prior to this, so this started in 2022. So I had a whole year of kind of watching and seeing how it was playing out in the industry before we had gotten it. So I had an idea of the preparedness side of things. I thought I was prepared. You're not. So we did, as far as preparedness goes, we revamped all of our biosecurity plans. We got them approved through the state. Everybody had premise IDs. They were undergoing movement permits, surveillance testing weekly if they were within the control zones, pre-movement testing if they were within the control zones. And that ends up being a whole lot of legwork because we were in a particularly dense area that was coming up with a lot of positive sites. So we were sending in, I think at one point we were sending in 10 separate farms worth of surveillance every week. And that is on top of the movement, the pre-movement testing, that's 24 and 48 hours prior to move. Now, when they tell you about AI in poultry, it's absolutely astronomical mortality. Your birds will just fall over. It'll go from 0 to 100 real fast. I saw that in one positive flock, but not the others. The one positive flock that we had was positive on a Wednesday. I had just tested them on Friday. They were fine.
Farms in the Texas and out there, and
Is that a question?
No, I think it was somebody who was on muted. I muted them. Go ahead.
Okay, so in 4 days, that farm was positive, and in that particular flock, it did go from 0 to, oh my goodness. And I told the contractor he had 3 flocks on that farm. Only one of the 3 was positive. So the other samples that were sent in for surveillance were negative, except for the flock we happened to be loading out that week. That was supposed to be his cleanup. So it was 28-pound hens that we had to depopulate. I should say the remainder of, because we got them depopulated within 48 hours, but at that point there wasn't a lot left. When I saw it hit the other 2 farms, they only were positive because of surveillance testing. I would not have pegged that farm as a farm that was suspect for AI. They had air sac, just like they get with E. coli, with a lot of different respiratory diseases, could have been ORT, but they came back with HPAI. That was another barn that we had to do 3 flocks down. Our third farm, I had done an audit for them, a biosecurity audit, 3 days prior to, because he had just gotten pulse, or was going to get pulse. So the week prior, I was down there doing an audit for him. He passed. Everything was great. I did that with the state, passed with flying colors. He gets his birds on a Saturday, on a Tuesday, same thing. He has AI in his older flock that we were going to send to market. Same thing, would not have pegged him for AI, came back on surveillance testing as positive. And mind you, they came back really positive. Like their CT values were low. So it wasn't a low path or anything like that. It was definitely high path, but it didn't present in the way that we were suspecting it was going to present in 2 of the 3 farms. Grand total, that was, I think we depopulated over 57,000 head for those 3 farms. And that translating into roughly, a 23-pound average on the hens, you're looking at over 2 million pounds of bird that did not make it to market. That's over $7 million that we lost out on. Financially, that is a huge blow on the company side. Since we are the integrator, we get a portion of, because the birds are in our contract, they're contracted with cucks. So those are our birds, but the grower also gets a cut for being the grow out. And they did all right. It hit them hard, but not as hard as it could have. financially. For a lot of our growers, this is their income. This is it. That's all they have. And they lost everything. Newer farms, they have a mortgage payment to make, and now they got hit with AI and they have nothing. So there's a huge financial repercussion there for them. There's the psychological repercussion for them. Farmers are tough people. You know, we deal with loss a lot, no matter what livestock industry you're in. And to see and hear these guys talk about it and just the defeat that was in their voice, I don't want anyone to have to go through that again. It was terrible. And you know, we had farmers that have been doing it for decades. We had farmers that have been doing it for 3-4 years. So we got both ends of the spectrum there. It created a huge hole for them because the process to get repopulated took about 3 months. So if you're used to placing every 13 weeks, like they are with us, they lost a quarter of their income. And you had 3 farms like that. So us as a company times that by 3. So we lost all of the birds. We skipped a placement before we could place again. So of those 3 farms, as the integrator, we lost half of a year's worth of production on those. So we've either got to come up with birds already in the industry that might not actually exist because it takes roughly 20 weeks to grow out. So those birds are either on the ground and available or they're not. So we took a hit on that one too. We create a huge hole in production for that. And then for me to be handling this on those 3 sites, a lot of my daily tasks had to go to other people in my department. So we're already pretty thin on the live side. And for my daily things to be pushed onto someone else, that was obviously a stress on them as well. But you don't think of all the things that go into it. So when you have a break, they're looking at epidemiological testing as well. So they're looking to see, where have you been? Who's been there? Where have they been before that? Where have they been after that? Did they get feed delivered? Did the garbage man come? Like little things like that. Did you mow the grass? For 2 weeks straight, you have to figure out where everyone has been, where everyone has gone, where they came from, if they could have brought it with them. Did you have a biosecurity break? We did not, which is great. So we did all the right biosecurity things. We were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. All it took was a pair of ducks in a retention pond for 1 day. And 4 days later, those farms were the positive farms. So that particular area of Lancaster was hit really hard, really fast. We were one of, I think, 7 or 8, 2 of at least 7 or 8 cases in a 4-day period. They were busy. So you meet a lot of new faces doing this, and you're kind of explaining the same thing 14 times. The other challenge that we had was our growers were plain community growers. So there was a lot of liaison on my part between them and the federal government, because there is some issues there as far as what they're able to do in that relationship. So that was a bit of a struggle to work through as well. When you're getting in outside people from USDA that don't understand, it's a hard thing to explain to them. You can't just walk in there and have them sign papers and get checks and things like that. That's not how it works. And to have to explain that a million times was interesting. So these contract growers, they got hit hard. I don't want to see anyone have to do that again. It was a lot of hours. We got a positive at, I think, 6 p.m. and I was up till 10 p.m. with USDA and PDA trying to mitigate this and make sure that the correct people knew so that we don't accidentally spread it somewhere else. Did the feed truck come that day? I called the feed mills because I needed to know where their feed trucks were, and they needed to know where their trucks were after our farms or before our farms so that they knew if there was any potential risk there for spreading it. It's almost infinite the ways you can spread this disease, and it's not something you think about until this happens. I wasn't even considering the man that was picking up the contents of the dumpster, but he was there. And that wasn't something I automatically thought of. Oh, he's someone I need to notify. I had to do that legwork in the morning during business hours when I could get a hold of someone to say, hey, I don't know what truck you used, but we had AI. I want to make sure you didn't go to any poultry facilities. If you did, please let me know. Let the state know. It's a team effort to kind of keep ahead of this. And that was something that we struggled with in the beginning. So in 2022, there was a lot of, we're trying to protect our identities type thing. And as an industry, we kind of decided we would rather know there's a possibility of 2 days before, rather than having to wait 3-4 days before those lab results come back from the national lab. So the way it works for the poultry industry is we send out a sample to our state lab, they get a positive, they send it out to the national lab. And that might take another 3-4 days before you get a result. So where we could have a result within 12 to 24 hours, we were waiting another 3-4 days before the industry was alerted. So we brought to the table, can we just let us know if there's a suspect? Because that gives everybody else the opportunity to start battening down the hatches. And if they've been anywhere, to stop going anywhere so that they don't accidentally spread it. So it was a lot of cooperation to be able to get through everything and keep everything under control and keep everyone from going anywhere they shouldn't be going. So prior to this, we were tight on biosecurity, but one of the things that we did make an adjustment to was allocating more funds to the biosecurity side of things. So we already had the plans, we had the premise IDs, the farmers knew what their responsibilities were going to be. But this highlighted the fact that we need to make sure that allied industries know, the manure haulers, the feed mills, the garbage people, anybody who's going to be coming on your farm to fix things or be around your birds, they need to be aware of the risk that they pose. So we implemented biosecurity measures on them, and part of that was the visitor log, so we can just, discern who was here, when they were here, when they left. And that was extremely helpful. And now that I look at it, biosecurity, it's cheap insurance. I would rather buy 15 boxes of boot covers than track in something from outside and have to deal with this repercussion. It's well worth it in my eyes. And it's tough when you get around to the certifications you hold. That was another battle that we had to fight. Was we have 4 different humane certifications or organic certifications that we hold. Trying to convince the auditors now is not a good time to come on farm was difficult. Obviously, I know that they need to do their audits, and I know that they need to make sure we're doing the right thing, but we need to protect our livestock too. So you've got to figure out with the industries that you work with, what is the best approach to that and what fits everybody's bill for that one, because obviously we don't want to risk the health of your animals in the name of a certification. And we do want to remain compliant in our certifications as well, because a lot of times that's your sales are based off of holding those certifications. So I understand their importance, but it was, in our case, I don't know if it was going to be preventable. We have 23 contract growers and 2 company farms. I don't think there was a way we were going to get out of this unscathed. Thankfully, this year has been a lot better. I'm hoping it improves, but I was absolutely floored by how fast things move once you do get AI, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I really wouldn't. But I think the key for us was making sure that we can stay ahead of it, and we're being transparent with everybody in the industry and in the allied industries to help control this.
Thanks, Sally. I do have one question for you before we turn it over to Stacelyn. With what you went through and knowing how dairy and poultry are intermingled in Pennsylvania, what do you think concerns the poultry industry the most when they think about HPAI and dairy?
I think it's probably that it's difficult to do biosecurity on a dairy farm. A lot of your dairy herds have outdoor access. And that's kind of the be all end all there. And I think for a long time, livestock is livestock. There's a lot of intermingling going from one farm to the other to check your animals. And now that's something that when you learn anything new, it takes repetition and a conscious effort to make those changes. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be a learning curve for everybody. But I think just learning how best to fit biosecurity to a dairy facility it's a challenge. And we understand that, but we have to move forward with it. You're on mute, Jane.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Stacelyn Hemmerwright from Cargill Meat Solutions, and she can actually talk through what she went through and her perspective. And both Shelley and Stacelyn, like I said to Nathan, may have more questions at the end, but we'll go ahead and turn it over to Stacelyn now. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Jane, can you hear me okay? Okay. Hey everybody. My name is Stacy Himmelwright. I'm the head cattle buyer for the Cargill plant in Wyalusing, Pennsylvania. Probably most everybody on this call knows that we're basically a cow facility. We do kill feds and bulls as well, but mostly we do cull cattle or cull cows. Just for a little context of how we had to deal with this for our industry. My team buys cattle all over the US. So we cover, for this plant specifically, we cover everywhere from Eastern Canada down to Texas, all of the East Coast, and as far west as Oklahoma. So I have 68 buyers that work for me throughout the country. And all that cattle we supply from various places for the Wyalusing plant. So we have a very big footprint to cover. We cover a lot of ground every week, and there's a lot of cattle to keep track of, a lot of cattle to keep track of. In a facility as big as the Cargill facilities, or even, JBS or Tyson or any of the bigger packers, there's a lot that goes into the background to make sure that we're complying with all state regulations, federal regulations on every single animal that unloads at our docks. So there's a lot of people here that work strictly just on making sure that we're complying and tracing every single animal that comes through. That being said, when this broke out in Texas, that was our first indication that something was happening and that we needed to assess our risk exposure. We need to assess the risk exposure for our customers, and we needed to get in contact with the proper state staff in Texas and in Pennsylvania to make sure that Cargill was doing everything that we needed to do to protect Pennsylvania herds, but also to protect our producers as well, all of our farmers, both our dairy guys and our beef guys that we work with on a regular basis to make sure that everybody's protected and doing what they need to do. So we did get notification first, like you would expect, organically from our guys on the ground. So we first got notification from our buyers saying, hey, we think there's something going on down here. There's a lot of cows getting sick, high temperatures and stuff. Kind of looks like a flu. We don't really know what it is. And as I started getting more reports from people on the ground down there, from our buyers and from our farmers, and from our sale barns too, that we go to down there, it became pretty apparent that we needed to assess the situation and maybe take a look at what was going on. Eventually, what I did do was I pulled out of Texas for a temporary amount of time before they actually came out with the diagnosis of HPAI in that state. There was definitely something going on. And in order to protect, like I said, the risk factor for Cargill and for our farmers and for Pennsylvania farmers, we pulled out of that state as far as purchasing whole cows. Specifically because they were already saying it was lactating dairy, we were pulling out of lactating dairy. That was temporary. We are buying in Texas again now that we have protocols to follow and that we know really kind of have a much better picture on how to handle this whole thing. But we did temporarily pull out. Now, as the disease kind of moved through states, we were keeping a very close eye on where it was going and the farms it was affecting, and constant contact with Dr. Hamburg and all of his team at the state to make sure that we are getting all the paperwork we need, we're complying with testing regulations, and we're making sure that as it moved through the states that we were doing what we needed to do as a company based in Pennsylvania to comply with our state regulations and what the vets were asking us to do. So we started doing the paperwork. We just waited for information to come out as far as what was required from testing to move these cows. It was very chaotic in the beginning, and it took a little bit to figure out really how we needed to track it and what was the best option for both the state staff and for the packer and for the farmer. It was a lot of extra work. So now that we're in kind of more of a steady state, I would call it, we actually have a whole new process that we had to add to what we already do at this plant to make sure that we're tracking all of the paperwork that's coming from out-of-state cattle, and make sure that we're filing everything and make sure that we are following up with every single sale barn, farmer, anywhere that we would get out-of-state cattle to make sure that they're sending that to us every day. So we have staff that follow up where if you ship us cattle and you don't send us your OSS form, we're going to call you or we're going to email you or we're going to figure out some way to get a hold of you to get that form from you before your cattle are processed. So that's a Cargill process that we do to make sure that everybody is covered as far as traceability for what we need for those cattle for out of state. So it's added a lot of paperwork on our end as far as changing the process, but it's what we need to do to make sure that that we're complying with state regulations and also to make sure that we're protecting Pennsylvania farms. As far as the farmers that we worked with, there was a little bit of panic in the beginning when it first started spreading around, especially before the official diagnosis came out that it was HPAI. People just didn't know what it was, and that's scary. So there was a little bit of worry, concern, a lot of phone calls.
So it was at 8, and I just put it to 4. Yeah.
I muted him.
Okay. So a lot of phone calls from all of our farmers asking, what do we do? Are you taking our cows? How do we handle this? How do we get tested? How do we know if we have it? And a lot of that was directing to Dr. Hamburg and his team, but also a lot of reassurance, right? Like from our standpoint of, like Nathan was talking about his meat market, you know, we're making sure that all of our farmers understand, yes, we're going to comply with whatever the state tells us to do. So if the state tells us that we can take your cows, we're going to take your cows. If we need more paperwork, you're going to have to give us that paperwork. So just kind of leaning on those relationships that we already have with a lot of our customers and as either whether it's farmers or sale barns to make sure that we're complying and that everybody's needs are being taken care of. So it was a very big shift, a lot of extra paperwork because, you know, the beef industry is not nearly as on top of biosecurity as the poultry industry or the hog industry. So it was a big shift for a lot of our farmers, especially our smaller farmers, to have to do that process of reporting what they're moving. That was probably the biggest challenge to some of our customers was actually having to document, hey, you got to write these cows down. If you're sending us cows from New York, if you're sending us cows from, you know, anywhere out of state, you've got to send this form and you've got to tell us what cows are coming and then you have to send it to the state. And that was a big shift. So it was a learning curve for that. Believe it or not, we are still working with some guys on making sure that they still send the paperwork every time they send the cows. It is extra labor, but it is what it is. So I would say 90% compliance right away, what we had. I mean, we didn't really have that big of an issue with majority of our farmers, no matter what state they were in. It was just a small percentage that really just were balking at, you know, the fact that it was happening, that the extra work they had to do, and just the fear factor, right? I mean, it was a big deal, and it still is a big deal now. And as you already heard, there's some pretty horrible implications if it does get to your farm. So we'll always advocate for our customers to do all of the regulations, follow them as much as you can. Any recommendations that your vet gives you, that the state staff gives you, do it. You want to make sure that you're covered, right? I mean, we all just heard what Nathan went through, and that's pretty awful. So we certainly don't want any of our own customers or any of our Pennsylvania producers to go through that.
Thanks, Aislinn. So I actually do have one question for you before we go to Rod. If HPAI, so fortunately for Pennsylvania, our farms haven't had to do as much paperwork as we're shipping to your plant, which is in the state. If HPAI cases were detected in Pennsylvania, how would it shift how the Cargill plant operates or how cattle procurement within the state occurs.
We would follow whatever recommendations were given to us by the state. So if there was no changes, if there was a positive detected in the state, then there would be no changes to what we're doing. If the state decided to change any regulations, require further testing, anything like that, then we would do the same and require whatever the state is asking the producers to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy. And we'll have time, I think, for more questions at the end. I appreciate you joining us today. And then our last panelist today is Rod Hissong from Mercer View Farms. Rod's just going to talk he's going to talk a little bit about the voluntary surveillance program. That's actually been a program being offered by the state and federal level to monitor herds, to have early detection of any movement of the disease. And Rod was one of those producers who signed up early and can talk to why he signed up and what that process was about. So, Rod, if you want to go ahead, I'm actually having trouble finding you on my screen too. But if you want to go ahead and start talking, and I will highlight your screen.
You can hear me, Jane?
I can hear you. I just can't find you.
Okay.
Go ahead and start talking.
Rod Hissong, Mercer View Farms. My brother and I, our home dairy is here in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, and we have a satellite dairy in White Post, Virginia, about 65 miles away. Our initial, and kind of just a little bit of background of how cows flow, and closed herd, raise all of our own heifers, truck all of our own animals. So very much, closed herd, nothing going to heifer growers or anything. But the home dairy is where all of our cows calve. They stay there until 10, 14 days post-calving, and then we send most of our first and a few second lactation animals to Virginia. Those animals stay there until they come back as dry cows or pre-dry. All the calvings are here, all the baby calves are here. We also send some heifers to Virginia that we raise in our facilities, and then they come back as well. So our initial thing, obviously was with, when the whole thing started to come out and the interstate shipping, and, we're at the point in Pennsylvania where we drive through Maryland, West Virginia, into Virginia, all in a pretty short period. And what that would mean, and, felt like we're a pretty big target moving animals, at least once a week or multiple times a week. And just, we're the type of operator, we try not to plead ignorance and ask for forgiveness later. So, we wanted to do the right thing. We wanted to be proactive. So after that initial round, we started testing individual cows going to Virginia, cows coming back from Virginia. So we started that, and that's quite a process to put the list together, to pull the samples, a lot of work. And then when they come along and say, hey, you can do a bulk tank sample, that sure sounds like a lot less work, and it has been. That was our initial reason for, signing up early on. There's other reasons, why, again, we wanted to do it, and we probably feel like others need to do it. We are beside a large layer poultry operation as well. We do some business back and forth with them, have had a good relationship, want to continue that. So again, for their security, our security, being able to have some testing and share that back and forth made sense. But then also, Franklin County being the second largest dairy county in Pennsylvania, if there's an outbreak, we want to know about it. If it's, and I'll talk about this, as far as our biosecurity plan. We've got a biosecurity plan, and the hard part of the biosecurity plan on the dairy is, what do you implement? How do you implement it? To what level do you implement it? And, honestly, we're at a pretty elementary level of how that's implemented. But if I knew it was 10 miles away, we would ratchet that up pretty quick. And maybe at that point it's too late. But We don't know unless we're testing, or unless our neighbors are testing, unless people, throughout the state are testing, that we know where the hot spots are, and then we can ratchet that, that up and down based on how close. So, again, a lot of animals moving around, and we want to make sure we're doing our part to contribute to that. And we certainly didn't want to be the ones responsible for, bringing influenza, to Virginia, or bringing it from Virginia into Pennsylvania. So, there's that as well, the liability, or just, again, trying to be a good, friendly farm neighbor and having that information. The other part is, food safety, and, again, anything we can do to contribute to learn more about this disease. And, we as farmers take for granted that we've got, a customer, and, they want our product, and it's safe. And, I think as an industry, we've already kind of got caught behind the 8 ball that this could even happen. And I don't think we can continue to bury our head in the sand, moving forward. We've probably done that for long enough, and, we need to be proactive. And so again, we feel like that's our part to do that, to help ensure a safe food supply, and that we're contributing. And probably my biggest concern is this thing mutates. And again, as you talk to, and again, we know, the poultry industry's been through this. It's, there's lessons to be learned. And, when it started in poultry, it didn't kill all the birds. And, after hearing, I'm thinking dairy, it's relatively minor, but after hearing Nathan, that's far from minor, as far as the implications. But, God forbid it mutates to a point where it kills cows, like it does poultry, and we've got to depopulate facilities. And so again, let's learn those lessons. Testing is the first step in that. So again, probably half a dozen different points there of why we decided to enroll. Obviously, there was a immediate need to do it for us with moving cattle across state lines, but I think there's some bigger picture reasons to do it. As far as enrolling, I'm going to give my veterinarian, Dr. Rodney Bechtel, a lot of credit. Him and I had obviously been in communication, but he did a lot of the legwork behind the scenes. And again, was being one of the first producers, there was some things that needed to work through. So it was him working with state veterinarians, getting that set up. And then the same way in Virginia. Virginia actually didn't even have a program, and I think they kind of copied Pennsylvania's program, a lot of the stuff that we had, and took it. So it was him behind the scenes kind of working with state vets. So when it came to what I needed to do, it was basically some paperwork, sitting down with him, sitting down with the state vet. I did need to make a biosecurity plan, which we did not have, which, again, can be pretty daunting because, again, how far do you take things? And, to me, that was a pretty daunting process. And then, again, we probably should. There's a lot of things we probably should do. We should follow that to a T, but again, I think it's been brought up for a dairy farm to follow that to a T is pretty cumbersome. So, what does that look like? And that's probably been the biggest thing that, you struggle with as far as how far do I take that. And, maybe we've not gone far enough and might look back someday and wish maybe we did. So as far as, the process thus far, how much time it's involved, how much it's taken. Again, I'll give my veterinarian a lot of credit for this. He happens to travel from Franklin County to Lancaster County every Tuesday morning. So we're pulling samples Monday, and he's taking them first thing Tuesday morning. So I don't got to worry about mailing them. I don't got to worry about sending them off. He's dropping them off directly at the state lab, which is a huge convenience for us. We haul our own milk, so we've got guys, already approved weighers and samplers. We direct load, so we're pulling string samples essentially, every load. So, it's pretty simple. We're already pulling the samples. We're just taking some of that milk once a week and sending it off. So, relatively easy for us because we did have some of those things in place. We were already, like I said, pulling samples of everybody, anyhow, through our inline samplers. So yeah, been going good, as far as getting it, probably more time getting it set up than, actual once it's up and rolling. It's been pretty pain-free. So again, working with the state veterinary office, they certainly have been great, working with, again, they want to help producers, get this thing rolling, get it started. By no way has it been cumbersome through them to get this rolling. They've been absolutely helpful. And, again, I'll give my veterinarian a lot of credit for having a lot of those conversations and getting things set up, behind the scenes. And Jane kind of put here, why would you recommend other producers, to consider enrolling? I mean, I think I kind of covered that there earlier. Again, even though if you're not moving animals from one place to another across state lines or whatever, I think as an industry, again, we kind of got caught behind the 8 ball of, just realizing this could even happen. And again, if you got a biosecurity plan, to what level do you enforce it? And if I knew it was 10 miles away, you'd ratchet that up, you'd change things. You would, again, we've learned all this from poultry, but if we're not testing, we're not going to know. So it not only protects us, it protects our neighbors, protects our industry, protects our food supply. Again, just got to kind of take a big picture approach at it.
Thanks, Rod. I actually do have one question for you, and then we'll open it up. If anyone has any questions for any of the panelists, you can certainly put them into the chat box. I'm not sure if Dr. Hamburg came back, but I was going to ask a question for someone in the state vet office, so I'm not sure who's on the call to check on that. But in the meantime, Rod, my question for you, as you mentioned that part of the process in signing up for the voluntary surveillance program was to put a biosecurity plan together, which you did not previously have. And my question is actually going through the process of writing out that plan, did it benefit your operation in other ways? Did it make you think through processes or protocols you had maybe deserved some thinking through and deserved some rethinking of how you do them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as an industry, we've gotten pretty lazy. We've gotten lazy, like visitors. I mean, years ago, people wearing boots, and I haven't toured a farm in years and worn boots, like as far as plastic boots. I never required it. Other farms don't require it. Well, now, yeah, any visitors, you're asking some questions. Even visitors that, hey, I'm not sure. Maybe I don't do business with them directly. I don't know where they've been. I did have, actually a cattle buyer want to stop by and look at some cows, and head guys that were from Texas. And I was like, I don't really do business with you. Not sure. This was when things were kind of heated, so it makes you think a little more, along those lines. Again, kind of on the, bigger picture around some things. There's some things. We've had some meetings with employees. We've got 70 employees total, and a lot of Hispanics, and a lot of the Hispanic culture. They all have backyard chickens and animals, and so we've had some discussions about, hey, we've not enforced them to get rid of them or anything, but hey, you can't wear the same boots when you're out feeding your chickens that you wear at the farm. And we do supply uniforms and boots, or we don't supply boots, but we supply uniforms, and like, hey, probably should keep your boots here. We've got a locker room. So some things, some relatively basic things that we just, quite frankly, were probably sloppy at and really didn't give much thought. But things that we're already supplying, things that are already there that they can utilize to hopefully minimize spread. A lot of things that are already there, just not really given much thought to. So again, not that we had to drastically change anything yet at this point.
Thanks, Rod. I'm not sure who's left from the state vet office, but I was wondering, Seth or somebody, if you could answer the question. the one question that came up was regarding the show season, and there was certainly some discussion around All-American and some of the testing that was required for All-American. And I guess, what is the state vet's office's advice or guidance if you are a Pennsylvania dairy farm? Maybe Dr. Hoving, you could answer this one too. If you're a Pennsylvania dairy farm headed out to World Dairy Expo or somewhere, what would you recommend they be thinking about before they leave for that show and even during that show? So again, whoever wants to take that question.
Jane, this is Dr. Tiwari. If Dr. Hamburg is not there, I can just say that if we have such a situation, reach out to Dr. Hamburg's office. Seth is helping, Seth Confer is helping. So reach out to the office. We have a specific advice. We are working with the Wisconsin lab. They have a specific requirement for bringing the animals back when the testing needs to happen. So I think if you have that specific need, reach out to Dr. Hamburg. We are liaising with Wisconsin to figure this out. The discussion are still underway to land a final plan, but I think, again, understand that this presents some difficulties for folks trying to make both shows. Thank you.
And then Dr. Hoving.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, I think we've heard that there's been a number of cases where it looks like asymptomatic cows have been moved, and that's how infections have been introduced into herds. And so I guess it's not something you want to tell a dairyman, but I would be really careful about taking animals to a show like to Wisconsin. Again, nothing against Wisconsin, but just there is certainly an increased risk when you do something like that. So you need to think really carefully about whether you want to do that. And if you do, then you need to think carefully about testing and about biosecurity and all that kind of stuff as well. So not something a lot of people like to hear because, you like to go to the shows and you like to show your animals, but there is certainly a risk.
And then along the lines of biosecurity, Dr. Hoving, probably isolating those animals when they return.
Yeah, for sure. And I would, even if it's not required, I would certainly consider testing them upon their return as well. Again, just in terms of the clothing that you wear there, again, relatively small risk, but again, it's pretty easy to mitigate that risk by just making sure you wash it really well. You use different boots and things like that. So there's some pretty simple ways to try and reduce the risk.
And
oh, you're muted, Jane.
I'm muted. Just have one more question for Nathan. Just we could end with this question actually. Nathan, what's one thing you wish you would have done beforehand to better prepare your dairy operation for HPAI? And what's one thing you did that you think really helped mitigate situation on the farm? Hopefully you're still there. Okay, he's not answering. So it looks like we actually lost Nathan. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up this since I'm not getting any other questions. I think this was a really good discussion. I do want to thank all the panelists for joining us today. This call will be recorded and will be made available. So if you would want to share it with other people, I do think what they shared was really beneficial. So please join us in sharing it and encouraging others to listen. We will have our next monthly call on October 9th at 1 p.m. Mark that date on your calendar. And in the meantime, feel free to email any questions to the state vet's office, to the paddle system, Dr. Hoving and his team, or to the center, and we'll get them answered for you. If you do want to reach the state vet's office directly, you can call them at 717-772-2852, or you can email them at ra-ahds@pa.gov. They are still looking for farms. Nathan, do you want to answer my question?
Yeah, I'm back. I was setting up a tillage tool in the field and lost my screen. So, yeah, I kind of said it before. What I would do is just on the treatment side of the cattle, be ready to hydrate cattle. That's the big thing that I would do different. And as far as something I'm glad I did, I'm glad I reported. I'm glad that I reported that I had the problem, because I think that there's a small percentage of people that have reported in our area versus who actually had it. So we won't really know what's going on with the disease unless we let somebody know.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to end this call, Nathan, is just reminding everybody that, you know, reporting, early detection, monitoring, those all will help us keep this under control. It will help us keep the disease from spreading. So just like I started to say, they're still looking for farms to participate in a voluntary surveillance program. That's a way to keep aware of whether the disease would come to Pennsylvania. And then the goal, as Dr. Hamburg has said before, is we want to stomp it out. We want to get rid of it. We don't want it to continue to spread. So doing the kind of things like what Nathan did, what Rod is doing, you know, the way Stacelin and Shelley, all of those efforts will help us keep it under control. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. The recording will be available at centerfordairyexcellence.org/hpai.industry-call, and we will also email the recording out. So thanks again for joining us. And if you aren't already, please sign up for our news alerts. Thanks for joining, everyone, and have a great day.